now tuned into the Money Level Show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Money Level Show, where we think, act, and prosper. And today we're back with Doomberg. How you doing today, buddy?
Hey, I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm happy that there's a human on the other side of the screen, but behind the bird, you know what I'm saying? Because some people may think I'm crazy. It feels like I'm becoming friends with a green chicken, you know?
You know, most of our friends are online these days anyway, right? So we're just ahead of the curve on that one.
Yeah, and you got a lot of catfishes and stuff like that. So I mean, sometimes people just put random pictures up, and it's someone on the other side, right? There's a lot of things happening in the markets right now. I know you aren't necessarily in the markets and such, and I kind of want to just get like your high level view of what are you all looking at? How are you all interpreting the information of tariffs and a lot of the, I mean, there's also a lot of fear mongering too, and I'm just not sure um, where we stand with a lot of things. And so I've been trying to get more objective views, and I would love to hear your view on just like what is your take on just things happening in the economy, the decisions of tariffs, and how is that going to impact average day Americans?
So I think if you take a step back and you analyze what Trump said he would do before the election, um, what he continued to say he would do during the campaign, and then what he has actually done since being sworn in, there's almost no deviation at all between what he promised and what he's trying to do. Whether he gets everything done is a different issue, and whether judges put up roadblocks or Congress stops him in certain regards. But everything he's trying to do has been overtly and completely and repeatedly explained by Trump himself at every opportunity, and should come, therefore, as no surprise to anybody. That's one thing. Second thing is it's very clear that Trump wants to shrink the federal government, wants to return power to the states, wants to return power to the executive branch that he believes has been um, unconstitutionally taken away. Um, and so he's executing that vision. And then overriding all of this is a strong motivation, which is the Department of Defense has suffered because of American deindustrialization, driven by offshoring and China's rise. And China now makes a majority of the things that we really need to field an effective military force. And for 40 years, Wall Street and Washington had their way, and we hollowed out American manufacturing in the name of financialization. And the Department of Defense desperately wants to overturn that. And so when you just look at the tariffs, for example, steel, aluminum, automobiles, these are the things that the US needs to be making. By the way, your automobile industry is mostly just a front for your military industrial complex, because those factories could be easily converted, as is going on right now in Germany. And it's no surprise that China has made global domination of the automotive manufacturing market one of its key strategic objectives. And so the things Trump is putting tariffs on, and the country he is really putting tariffs on, all point towards the realization in Washington that the US would lose a war with China today. And I think, viewed through that lens, China, rightly or wrongly, is assumed to be the single greatest threat to US global economic dominance, prosperity, call it whatever you will. And in that context, the war in Ukraine seems like an awfully foolish idea. We have, squandered our inventories. We've driven Russia much closer to China. Um, and that collaboration is a geopolitical catastrophe for the Atlantic Alliance, I guess you would say. And so that's how we see it. We are in a recession. Our channel checks in industry have been flagging this from the very beginning of the year. Supply chains are seizing up in a way that has not yet been seen since COVID. It doesn't mean it's as bad as COVID, or that the economy isn't more resilient because of COVID, but supply chains are seizing. We're going to have a recession, and I believe Trump is betting that deregulation, cutting the federal government, tax cuts, and an investment boom to reindustrialize the US will all occur in time for the midterm elections for him to have turned this thing around. We'll see. It's a race against the clock. And there are very powerful forces that are aligned against Trump in order to stunt this objective. So it's very complex, but at the same time, it's quite simple. He's executing precisely what he promised he would do. And to the extent that the market has been in denial, that's an opportunity for investors.
Hmm. Yeah. So some people may disagree on the way he's going about things, whether that's his tactics. They may agree overall with the strategy of like, okay, we do need to bring on more manufacturing, rare earths, and all of those things. We do need to have that happening in our own nation, but they may disagree with the tactics. And so I was kind of thinking about the tactics in terms of like, are we putting the cart before the horse? Because there's been a lot of, I mean, I guess it depends on headlines and stuff, right? So factoring that in, but it seems like the tension between the U.S. and China has picked up, and we're not even in position to. I mean, we're still dependent on them in a lot of ways, it seems like. And so, it's kind of like, okay, you would think that, you would kind of play a little more chess, start building what we need to build here before go to the fight with a knife, go to a gunfight with a knife. What do you think there, like on
I,
those type of
I think
things?
I think you're precisely correct.
Hello everyone, this video is sponsored by Power Metal Resources. I'm excited to introduce to you an opportunity of a lifetime with this company. As you may know, we are currently in a broader commodities bull run. We've seen gold rally 26% in 2024, uranium prices surge significantly since the COVID lows, but some may wonder, are these upward moves over? I argue, no, they are not. In regards to gold, central banks around the world are continuing to buy gold to hedge against the weaponization of the dollar. We also have global debt and deficits that are ballooning to astronomical levels with no signs of slowing down. These factors indicate continued upward pressure on gold prices. And we haven't even mentioned uranium, so there's a huge supply and demand gap of about 26 million pounds currently, and future projections show that these gaps are expected to widen year over year for decades. Prices in uranium must increase to incentivize more production, and I haven't even mentioned the clean energy demand. Major tech companies such as Microsoft, Google, Amazon, they are investing in nuclear energy to power their AI data centers. And lastly, we have countries around the world that are setting carbon net zero goals, and there's a massive gap between these goals and the supply of these critical minerals such as rare earths, nickel, copper, and many others. And these minerals are needed for building electric vehicles, powering renewable energy grids, as well as supporting AI and tech data infrastructure. So Power Metal Resources is a way that you can get exposure to many different metals. They have a global portfolio in different countries such as North America, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Australia, and Africa. The projects are developed internally or through strategic joint ventures. When ready, projects are either sold outright or listed on recognized stock exchanges. This strategy crystallizes value from their exploration and development work. Now, when we talk about valuation of this company, the net asset value of this company is approximately $52 million. They currently have a market capitalization of $25 million. This means that the shares are over 50% cheaper than the valuation of their assets. And this doesn't even account for the expected price increases in the commodities bull market. So in short, Power Metal Resources is positioned to capitalize on these long-term trends. I encourage you to visit their website, powermetalresources.com. You can find them on the London Stock Exchange under ticker POW or the OTC market ticker POWMF. This is not financial advice, and please do your own research and due diligence.
Part of Trump's inner monologue is that the U.S. is still the most powerful country in the world and merely needs to reorient itself to maintain its position. That's an open question. I noted with interest Trump's reference to super weapons that nobody knows exist, but the enemies know that the U.S. has them, and if anybody crosses certain red lines, then they will be deployed. And there's all kinds of talk about extraterrestrial technology in the hands of the U.S. government, and who knows? I mean, I certainly don't have a direct line to DARPA, but I agree with you. And it's not like China hasn't been preparing for this. And this is why I think that the war in Ukraine has been such a catastrophe, because it has driven Russia into the arms of China, which has always been, keeping a safe distance between those powers has always been a key objective of Western diplomacy. And now, because of the Biden administration's catastrophic blunders, Trump did inherit a mess. And I note with interest that Trump is now rebranding the Ukraine war as Biden's war, which he probably would have been wise to do from the beginning of his administration, as opposed to putting so much of his personal credibility and prestige on the line in an effort to try to end the war, which, by the way, I think is a perfectly laudable effort and a sensible one from a strategic perspective when pondering U.S. geopolitical strategy, right? And so, but yeah, China is aware the war in Ukraine has been in many ways a reprieve for them. They have had a front row seat to see how NATO weapon systems perform in a hot war. Who knows what technology has been shared from Russia to China in exchange for China's help in the war in Ukraine. One way that you could frame the war in Ukraine is that it has been a proxy war between the US and China, with Russia playing the role of China's proxy and Ukraine playing the role of NATO's proxy. And so one of the things that Trump may be trying to do, and I want to freely admit that I got this concept from a Substack called Coffee and COVID, which is quite good, is what they characterize as sort of the Russia experiment. So 3 years ago now, the world cut off Russia from the global economy to the best that it could. Russia, like the US, is blessed with an enormous inventory of resources and has the theoretical ability to be self-sufficient, and spent the next couple of years, 2022, 2023, 2024, becoming self-sufficient in almost every regard, and it has succeeded. Its economy is booming, it's resilient, its military-industrial complex is vastly outproducing not only the US, but all of NATO combined. This is something that NATO freely admits. In fact, the head of NATO, Mark Rutte, just a few months ago said that Russia was producing 3 times the munitions that all of NATO was producing combined. Russia's military is far stronger now than it was before the war in Ukraine. It is far more battle-hardened now than it was before the war in Ukraine. And China has far more invaluable intelligence, war data to study and to work into its game planning. And look, Pete Hegseth was just interviewed a couple of days ago, and this is going into a piece that we're writing, where he said that China has the missile technology to take out all US aircraft carriers within 20 minutes. Now, that's not me saying that, and that's not Russia saying that. That is the current sitting Secretary of Defense saying that. Now, you could say that he's saying that to negotiate for a higher budget from Congress. Alarmism has unlocked many a wasteful dollar in Washington, D.C., but nonetheless, it is a pretty striking thing for the Secretary of Defense to have said. And so perhaps ripping off the Band-Aid now, throwing up the walls of tariffs, and forcing a reindustrialization of the U.S. Is the correct path. Look, the prior system was always unsustainable. It's a big difference. And there always had to be a transition, and the friction of that transition was always going to be high. Trump is, in theory at least, not able to run for re-election, although he's making noise that he will attempt to. So, we're going to see recession. We'll just look at what happened with Russia, right? Inflation issues, but at the same time, full employment, heavy, manufacturing, close partnership with China, which we obviously don't have, and we don't have the analog of China to help us that Russia had. But I think that is the experiment that is being attempted. Whether it succeeds is a different issue.
And what does this mean? So thinking about foreign relations, I mean, the all-out tariffs on a lot of countries. It was a lot of countries outside of China. And then the things that have been said with some of our allies and such. And so, where does that put us at? Like, because it seems like okay, we're going toe to toe with one of the biggest powerhouses in the world, and then we're also well, the president is saying things against like some of the allies, and I'm kind of like, okay, well, where does this put NATO? Where does this put like, are we just out by ourselves? Like what do you think there?
Yeah, again, I'd like to highlight the work of others. I would recommend that people go and find Marvin Barth's Substack at Thematic Markets. He put out a really great piece. La Cosa Nostra Americana is the title of it. A really brilliant analogy. Um, Europe basically is geopolitically insignificant without US backing. Trump and similar allies have been clamoring. To be fair, not just Trump, US administrations dating back decades have been clamoring that Europe needed to do more uh, to um, to invest in its own defense, and it has not. And it has found itself in a situation where it has antagonized Russia, China, India, and the United States all at once. This is truly a problem for Europe. And Trump is executing sort of a mafia-style loyalty test. I note with interest that Bukele's visit to the Oval Office went decidedly better than Zelensky's visit to the Oval Office did, and the whole tone and tenor of Bukele's visit was paying respect to the mob boss. And again, that's an analogy. I give full credit to Marvin Barth for publishing a brilliant piece. I highly recommend people go look at it. I restacked it last night. If anybody listening follows the Doomberg Substack on notes, great piece, makes a lot of sense to me. And any model that explains behavior is a useful one, even if it's not true. And I think that's a particularly excellent metaphor to understand what's going on now. So basically, Trump is demanding a VIG from the people that are being protected. That's a nice storefront window you have there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. And that's what's going on, I believe. And Trump certainly, look, he comes from New York real estate. It's not like he doesn't understand this type of politics. And just the words and the language he uses is very consistent with Don Corleone, And so it is what it is. And in fact, Marvin Barth makes the point that, the U.S. is no longer the police, right? And when you don't have an effective police, you have to turn to the mob for protection. It's gangster style. Civilizations operate that way, have operated that way. We currently don't operate that way in the West. We view ourselves as being above such primal societal organizational structures, but they do exist, and they can be effective. And that's where the world is heading. I think it's a very useful model. And again, I can't encourage people enough to go read it.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Thanks for sharing that. So you mentioned Trump wanting to shrink the federal government. He has been, there's been a lot of jobs cut in the federal government. So this whole thing with Doge, I've been kind of diving into. At one point, they could have saved 400 billion. Now you look at the Doge site, it says 150 billion. The national debt clock went, I think it was at 400 billion at one point, and now it's at like 300 billion. And so there's kind of some discrepancy in the numbers. And I know you and we've talked before the election and just saying like, okay, like how much progress are they really going to be able to make, And so, do you still got the same similar view there? Do you think that, I mean, the Doge, it seems like it's almost over. I don't know if Elon's on the way out. Like he's been kind of a little more silent in that,
Yeah.
in the media and stuff. And so I'm kind of wondering what's next there.
Yeah, Elon is an interesting character. We've followed him with varying degrees of attention for many, many years. He does occasionally exaggerate, but this really comes down to how much stomach there is amongst the Republican caucus in Congress to codify these savings into law. There's no question in my mind that there's $1 trillion of waste, fraud, and fat in the federal government, and it should be taken out. And anybody who's opposed to taking it out is, by definition, in on the grift. And to the extent that Elon has been extremely polarizing. He has served a useful role for the president. Lightning rods exist for a reason. But such lightning rods run their course, and after they're struck with enough lightning, it's probably time to discard them. And Elon has a very severe situation going on, which is that the foundation of his personal wealth is his stock in Tesla, and all the rest of his wealth comes from private market valuations that are basically confidence games. And demand for Tesla has shrunk radically. They just had a catastrophically bad first quarter. The brand destruction of Tesla amongst the subset of the population who would normally buy an electric vehicle has been profound. For as much as he has replaced support from the left with support from the right, conservatives in Texas don't buy electric vehicles. They buy Ford F-150 pickup trucks, and they don't buy electric versions of that either, as Ford will tell you. And so deliveries were down substantially in the first quarter. I don't know where they're going to recover. And the attacks against Tesla, funded as they may be by outside organizations, and by the way, wholeheartedly condemn them. Wanton criminality has no place in our politics, but they're real. They exist. It's an expression of, I believe, unfounded anger on the left, but it does exist. And that used to be the heartbed of demand for Tesla. And so if Tesla goes, Elon's in trouble. And I think there's only so much time you want to spend being a lightning rod for somebody else when your financial empire is at risk. And I think he's going to be spending more and more time on the financial empire going forward. And if that means that Doge is incomplete and it requires Elon's force of personality to get this stuff done, then that's a shame. But I think anybody who's opposed to the waste and fraud and that's so obviously there. Like, oh, you can't cut Social Security. There's so much fraud in Social Security. You can't cut Medicaid. That's when people say you can't cut something, it's because they're in on the fraud. And so shame on the Democrats for not co-opting this issue. Instead, they've just decided that every dollar of federal spending is worth fighting for, even if it is a complete ripoff of the taxpayer. And the fact that Elon has been a polarizing figure is undoubtedly a setback to the Doge effort, I think.
Yeah. And this reminds me of so I was listening on Rick Rule's channel, the interview with David Stockman, who wrote The Triumph of Politics under Reagan's administration, and he does talk about like how the politics of everything like can easily derail these initiatives. So I mean, like, and sometimes when I say, like, because I'll say, oh, the government can't cut Social Security, but what I mean by that is that many people aren't going to get voted back in. Like
Sure.
if they touch people's
here's what you could do, Daryl. Like, you could just say everybody who's currently on Social Security needs to reapply, and you have 2 months to do it. Here's the website, and you just have to prove you're a living human being.
Yep.
Who's a citizen, right? And in 2 months, everybody who hasn't reapplied stops getting their checks, and they get another 30 days after that once they realize they need to do it. And then that's one thing. So then that would wipe out, and you use modern technology, facial recognition. God, you can't get on a plane without somebody taking a picture of your face. Why do you get a lifetime check from the U.S. government, in perpetuity without at least proving that you're alive? Who could be opposed to that?
Yeah.
And so that's one thing you do. The second thing you do is offer people a buyout for a fraction of their NPV. You'd be surprised how many people would take it. A one-time debt issuance to fund. We do this in corporations all the time. It's called restructuring, zero-based budgeting. We talked about this in our piece, The U.S. is not broke. There's all manner of things that any rational person could do to address what is clearly a bankrupt Ponzi scheme. They have promised more benefits than they could ever hope to collect and grow, and they're funding current obligations by "quote unquote" new investment, new investors putting money in. It's a Ponzi scheme, and it needs to be addressed. It will have to eventually be addressed because you'll just run out of money. There are ways to address it. Let's do it while we can. You can't have that rational conversation today because half of Washington is going to lie and deceive and politicize the issue, and the other half are afraid of it. So, I mean, who could be opposed to simply making people reapply? Make it as easy as possible. Everybody's got a webcam, right? Government can help you, you know, your family can help you. Minimum effort needed to wipe out, I would guess, 35% of Social Security payments are fraudulent. And so let's smoke that out. I mean, it's not that hard, you know. We should do it. We should do it before AI makes it impossible.
Yeah, that's true. So you mentioned recession earlier. So we saw the oil price fall significantly. I mean, oil stocks got crushed. And I know you've been talking about oil, and there's plenty out there, and that's usually a recession indicator and such. And so, what are some of the other things that you are looking at? What's your take on oil right now? And then what are some other recession indicators that you are leaning on uh, to confirm that view that we're in a recession?
So first of all, we sat up in our chair in shock when OPEC poured oil on a burning tape Thursday after Liberation Day, basically announcing the end of OPEC, in our view. It was a profound day, a historic day. A deal has been cut between Russia, the US, and Saudi Arabia, the details of which we'll never know, at least not contemporaneously. But the president wants $50 oil and he's going to get it. And like we joke internally, I don't know who's buying oil at 62, but they don't like money. The oil prices are coming down, absent a war in the Middle East, of course, but you know, going long oil, hoping for a war, isn't a very sound investment strategy in our view. But OPEC, it was inevitable. We've been predicting this for some time. The co-producers, the producers who produce both crude oil and natural gas, have been chipping away at the foundation of OPEC, which is basically a crude oil only cartel. The products are being linked in the market. They're fungible in the marketplace. And it was only a matter of time before the avalanche of NGLs and natural gas hitting the US and the rest of the world would underpin OPEC's ability to keep crude prices artificially high. That crude prices have been artificially high is the very foundation of the arbitrage that has been chipping away at OPEC's power. And they lamented. We're going to see countries within OPEC cheat. We're going to see a dash to be the first to try to make it up in volume. And I think we're going to see, all things being equal, big caveat, no war in Iran, $50 oil price here pretty soon. I could be wrong. That's just our view. There's an enormous amount of oil. The physical markets are well supplied. And anytime we produce more oil, we produce more natural gas, which keeps natural gas cheap, which makes it highly motivating to substitute oil with natural gas. And that's just what's been occurring. And in the long run, all energy inputs will sell for the same price, correcting for energy content and logistics. Crude oil will not be an exception.
Mm-hmm. And usually that's like a recession indicator with oil. And so is that one of the
No. No. So historically, spikes in oil prices have preceded recessions. And crashes in oil prices are the foundation of economic growth coming out of them. This is a OPEC decision to lower oil prices in return for who knows what from Trump. We posted on Notes last night, Substack's version of Twitter. I don't know why people thought Trump would be bullish for energy prices. We've been flagging this for a long time. I've said it multiple times on your show. It's bullish for supply, bearish for price, which is bearish for equities. Trump wants energy dominance. Energy dominance is not bullish for energy equities. For some participants in the energy supply chain will do well for sure, but the producers, the Exxons of the world, aren't going to do well in this environment. They'll be patient and buy all their competitors on the cheap at the bottom, but they're not looking at a great string of quarters at these prices. And oil is just so abundant and incredibly cheap. We wrote a piece yet again taking to task this whole concept of peak oil and what nonsense it is and how much money it has probably lost investors over the decades. I don't know how much data a concept needs to have shown to be completely wrong for it to die. We for the purposes of modeling, the Earth has an infinite supply of hydrocarbons. And the quicker people get that into their heads, the better they'll be at investing in the energy sector. The long-term trend of the cost of energy in real terms is down forever.
Yeah, yeah, that's very alarming. So now we have so there's been some turbulence in the markets, a lot of volatility. Bonds haven't been a flight to safety for many, and many people are flocking to gold. And we see gold at historic highs and measured in dollars. And we also see the gold miners have started to wake up to some extent. And so, what's your view there on gold? I know last time we talked, you had an uncomfortable
Sure,
amount of gold, and just want to get your view there because people are
sure.
flocking there.
Yeah, I have less gold now than I did then, but I still have a very substantial amount of gold. Um, I think one of the things Trump may have given in exchange for collaborating on the oil price is allowing the gold price to rise. I think in a universe where the U.S. is reindustrializing, the dollar has to get a lot weaker, which necessarily means, as measured in dollars, the price of gold needs to get a lot higher. And a lot of wealthy countries, including Saudi Arabia, have a lot of gold and have a desire to get into the gold mining business as a longer term sort of value creation enterprise in their national interest. So I'm not saying that's what happened, but it would certainly explain a lot. Gold has been on an incredible run, and I'm sort of the Rick Rule school, where if you bought something and it's tripled in price, maybe you take a little bit off and let the rest roll. And so I just gold is really a vehicle of savings, and we decided that gold had become too large a share of our savings, and so we just took a little bit off. But I still own a significant amount of gold, both in the form of the Sprott Physical Gold Trust and in physical gold that I keep locked up nice and safe. Um, so I still sort of happy when gold goes up, but I don't own as much as I did the last time I was here, if I'm being full disclosure.
Yeah, yeah, and there's I mean, and this is like also kind of like a signal. I mean, even when the talks of tariffs was hyping up, we had I don't know if it was a historic amount of gold being um, having to be delivered from London to New York. Many people have kind of flocked there, like as a form of safety, and for me, in that sense, it's kind of like um, I'm kind of wondering if it's overbought and it's going to come and it's going to correct at some point. I think over time it is going to continue to go higher, and this isn't even as like an investment, but just as like insurance for our wealth. And so yeah, I just been kind of trying to keep my finger on that. And then I'm kind of wondering also with the tariffs and the trade war, if this is going to further um, alienate some of the nations that have already been stockpiling gold and wanting to really really get off the U.S. Kind of dollar system and stockpile even more gold. And so I don't know. It's so many factors that I just been kind of trying to process.
Yeah, same here. Everybody is doing the same calculus. Excuse me. And I think look, gold is wildly underowned. I saw an interesting chart on Twitter. Twitter, you always have to sort of make sure that you double check the data. But the global value of all the gold divided by the value of the S&P 500 is still, you know, pretty de minimis in historical terms. Retail in the U.S. is not flocking to gold. Gold bugs are talking to each other in louder pitches about gold, but there's not that many people. Like if I canvass my neighborhood, I bet I'm one of the few people that actually owns an American Eagle or two. I don't think it has reached the zeitgeist yet, and for reasons that are probably beyond our ability to understand, it is re-entering the sort of neutral reserve currency role that it has. Neutral reserve asset role that it has historically played, and gold could go a lot higher from here. If it does, I'd be happy. I wouldn't regret my sort of portfolio management because I live by that strategy and it's served me well over the decades. I'm not a market timer. But again, we don't really view gold as an investment. We view gold as a vehicle to maintain our purchasing power. And if I'm going to do a private investment and liquidate some of my savings to fund it, I'd liquidate some of the gold this time around. And I think that's just the way we like to run our portfolios. But like over the long run, yeah, the gold is wildly underowned. It has suffered from decades of propaganda to minimize its importance to the global financial system. That is a uniquely Western phenomenon. The rest of the world understands perfectly well the inherent value of gold and the advantages that come with owning it and having physical access to it yourself. And I think we're going to see that trend grow over time still.
Yeah, that's good. Well, Doomberg, appreciate you for coming on the show again and everything. Where can people connect with you more in your writings and your publishings?
Sure. Everything's at doomberg.com, Doomberg.com. You'll find everything there, one-stop shop for all things Doomberg. Daryl, it was great to talk to you. Looking forward to the next time.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Take care.